Welcome to Conversations from the Edge of Consciousness. I'm your host, Christine Madera. For me, and possibly for you, the inner world of consciousness has always been much more real and way more fun than the so-called real material world. Growing up, I thought I was alone in this, but I'm not. There are a lot of us, and far too many have no one to talk to who shares this experience. I've been lucky to cultivate a community of friends who love to talk about the energies, ideas, and vibrations that are pushing the edges of our own consciousness, as well as our collective consciousness. In Conversations from the Edge, we share our conversations with you. Welcome to Conversations from the Edge. This is Christine Madera, and I am your host, and I am here today with Michė Meizner. Welcome, Michė.
Hi, Christine. Thanks for having me.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you want us to know, and then we will launch into a conversation.
Okay, great. Thanks. I am Michė Meizner. I'm a coach, mentor, and healer, and I work with people to assist them in their spiritual awakening and in stepping into the truth of who they are rather than who they've been trying to fit into. And I see that as my job here, is to help people, as I say, be the gift that you came here to be.
Well, and that's perfect for our conversation today, because right now we are in the midst of this huge global change, and this is a long-term global change. There's so many cascading effects from coronavirus that we're going to be in this state of uncertainty and change for quite some time. And so the tendency in times of uncertainty and times of change is to either want to go back to what is, quote unquote, normal, what's familiar, or to, try to think about what's next, but doing it from the framework of the past. So we do it either by catastrophizing, because if everything's going wrong, we put it in this framework of, how would that fit into the past? Because it's hard really to step into envisioning something that's entirely brand new. And so we were going to talk a little bit today about how we might go about creating what's next in a way that is helpful and hopeful, and really bringing about the kind of society and that we have globally and in our various countries, but also personally. So you had done a little Facebook Live on this. Do you have any insight to start us out with?
Yeah, and one of the points that I kept coming back to in this teaching that I was doing is the idea that people are either saying that they want to get back to normal or they want to get to a new normal. And whether it's the back to or the new one, it's still, there's a certain amount of, desire for certainty. And I want to know what it's going to be like. I want to know how it's going to go. And I think what we're stepping into, actually, I hope what we're stepping into actually is quite a bit of uncertainty. And to become more comfortable with that, what uncertainty demands of us is that we be present so that we can respond, right? Responsibility, response, our ability to respond, as opposed to, I can't wait for the new level of autopilot that I can go on. Like, now I know,
right,
it goes this way, and I can get used to that, and I'll just deal with that. Rather than, as you were saying, to envision something new. And the difficulty in envisioning something new is you don't know what that is. It's easy to envision something, like if I say envision a tree, you're going to pull up some tree from your memory. Yeah. You're not probably going to come up with some brand new, I wouldn't even know that it was a tree because it was so different. It really requires openness and creativity and the willingness to not know for sure what the outcome is, but know which direction you're pointing in and sort of what you want on a bigger level. What do you want it to feel like? How do you want people to be interacting and treating each other? And then take one step and one step and one step toward that.
And one of the things about uncertainty, and it's really uncomfortable, and our last conversation was all about discomfort. And we've got a few conversations in this podcast about discomfort because it is so juicy, and it is also like uncertainty, chaos, for lack of a better term, are all very creative forces. You can't, when there's certainty, you cannot create something new because everything is kind of on like autopilot, as you say. But in lots of uncertainty, where everything is up in the air and up for change, the people who are really clear, not so much with their vision of how things are going to look, but more with how they would like the world and themselves. This is not about making the world a particular thing differently than it is making yourself that, but coming into how you would like life to feel, and let that feeling begin to determine what it is that you are imagining. And I did this as I write novels. I have one out and I've got several unfinished novels, but one of the things I did for me, because I like stories, is I began to imagine what life might be like in 30 years or 50 years or whatever. I didn't really put a time limit on it, but I was just imagining, like, after we had gone through the various levels of shift and change, the economic and government and all the different levers within that, and how things might move, and how money might be, and all this kinds of stuff. And I looked at the end result of what I would like it to be, and I kind of imagined, the peace and the feeling of focusing on human dignity, and on fostering the potential of everybody, and on allowing everybody to have the freedom to pursue their own genius and recognize that everybody has that. And how would society be set up in that sort of way? And how might it be set up if we were focused instead of the acquisition of money, on well-being and our mutual well-being, personal and mutual well-being, as our primary value around which everything flowed. And so for me, when I kind of get lost in, like, looking at the headlines and stuff, I go to this place of, this is how I would like life to feel, and the priorities that I would like life to have for myself and in the world that I choose to live in. And, being free in myself, and also giving everybody else the freedom to move to their highest potential, the freedom to live life the way that they choose to live it, as long as everybody's honoring one another's dignity and free will and value and that kind of stuff. So that's how I've been working on this somewhat. And I've got other ways too. But what did you suggest? What are you doing to help you stay focused?
Yeah, I think it's someone I was, sharing and teaching the other day of trying to stay present within myself. And for me, staying present successfully has
Mm-hmm.
a lot to do with loving myself and trusting myself, and being honoring myself, I guess, really. And so what I was saying to this woman who had asked some questions too is, she was feeling some grief and a little despair and a little annoyance that suddenly, with the quarantine and the lockdown situation opening up some, and then she had to really go back into the public sector, in the
Mm-hmm.
job that she has, in business that she runs. And yes, that, things are going to change as we shift out of being in sort of the shelter in place. The assumption, though, I think that the place that the disgruntlement and the criticism or whatever of herself and what she did or didn't get done in the time that she had,
Mm-hmm.
the quietude and the solitude, has to do with assuming what comes next, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like,
Yeah.
if you're upset at what you're losing, because you're assuming that what's going to come next is not going to be that good or that right for you or that comfortable or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
we talked about discomfort too. So yes, I don't really mean comfortable or uncomfortable, but to really stay with uncertainty. And like I was saying before, that I don't know what comes next, but I know for right now, let's say, my sense of connecting with other people, my feeling like part of my job or part of a talent or a gift that I have right now is to be helpful to people to stay out of their own stress, and
Mm-hmm.
to be able to make better, more present, in the moment decisions for themselves and for whoever else they're responsible for. And that if we can do that, if I can do that, stay in the moment, okay, now what? Now what's the inspiration? Now what? I feel like I'm losing, I'm getting caught up in, the struggle in the story. So how do I take myself out of that? Maybe it's I take myself for a walk. And I can still take a walk when the quarantine is over, the same way I can take a walk, and more so even, when the quarantine wasn't over. So to not assume that I'm going to lose the things that I was living with and being during this time. And maybe also not assuming that what I can't wait to get back to is what I had before that I wasn't able to do now, right? We limit ourselves so much as we cling to, the push away from pain and grab toward happiness. But if you are certain that you know what those two things are, what falls into which bucket, then you're stuck with those two buckets, there's a whole lot else that we can't, like I was saying before, we can't envision it because it's ahead of us.
It's unknown. Yeah, it's not created yet. They had that saying for years and years, and it's still true, that we're training kids in college and in high school for jobs that are not created yet. That, for careers that haven't even been imagined yet. So how do you prepare for something that isn't even a thing yet? And right. So I think that's part of the idea. Like, we have core skills that we can rely on as we move forward that can help us in navigating this. And you talked about one that I think is so important, because if we're not in that state of awareness and equanimity and being able to get out of story and get out of, the which normal am I in? And it has to be a normal here somewhere, because the uncertainty is too uncomfortable, that puts us into personality, it puts us under stress, and we make decisions poorly, because we make decisions from a place of stress. We don't actually see possibility. We only see a very limited set of options that are generally not the best options, and that spiral us back into more stress. Whereas in awareness, when we kind of pause and come back into the present moment and we're there, we have access to more grace. We have access to more possibility. We have access to ways of moving forward that we might never have thought of, because they had never been there before. And we would never see them if we're in stress, where we're only able to look for what is, what we're used to, what we're expecting to see. And so that one skill of being in awareness and being in presence and in the present moment is actually the one skill that can help us navigate forward from uncertainty in a way that is reliable. It's not that we have a reliable outcome, it's that we have a reliable way of navigating the moment.
Yes, right, which creates resilience. And we start to, like I was saying before, trust ourselves, not trust ourselves that we have all the answers, but trust ourselves, if we stay present, that we can get what we need, or connect with who we need to connect with, or come up with some new solution.
Yeah, and we talk about like awareness. So there's a personality, and then that state of awareness to me is this larger part of us, and it's not like just some random little voice inside of us. To me, it's almost like this larger container of our life and our larger container of our energy. And to remember and trust, and this is where I've really been working on recently, to remember and trust that part of me is what is actually doing the creating. It is what is actually creating it's actually creating the reality that I am enmeshed in, or I'm in. And I kind of can create my own way I'm in that reality, whether I'm in stress or I'm not, but that part of me has already got the next step or two or 3 or 10 or 12 sorted out. Like, I don't need to be responsible for that, or I don't need to know what those things are, because if I know how to trust that, then I'm always getting the next step.
Right.
And that trust, like that to me is one of the big skills of us, not just moving and navigating in this particular time, but in this big change we are collectively as human beings, from relying on ego and personality and the known to really tapping into what is it, what are the deeper experiences of being human, and how do we learn to trust our larger self instead of just, our brain.
Hmm. Right. So my name, Michė, I took
Mm-hmm.
from Tibetan, and it means big sky mind. And it's a
Ooh.
lot what you're talking about, that the awareness, the consciousness, the who that we are is as vast as the sky.
Mm-hmm.
And our thoughts and feelings are like the weather that moves through it. And we tend to get really caught up in the weather and, feel like we have to control it and react to it and respond to
Yeah.
it, manipulate it and all of this, when our larger awareness is seeing a bigger picture, and not only can handle or help us handle the next moment, doesn't freak out about it the way our everyday personality caught up in the story self does,
Mm-hmm.
because it doesn't feel at risk in the same way. It's not jumping into survival mode even when we're not really for fearing for our survival. Of course sometimes we are, right? And
Right. Yeah.
I know we have lost many people in this virus period here.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't mean to minimize that. I mean, for the people who are um, just in general, that it's our knee jerk reaction
Yeah,
to.
because oftentimes it's our emotional survival. Like, if our physical
Yeah.
survival is in peril, that's a whole different
Hmm.
navigation. And it's still like, I know I did some hospice volunteer work, and I've been with people who have been dying and things. And there's two basic approaches to it. I mean, one is the fear based, where it's, everything is driven by the fear of what's going to happen. But even most of those people, by the very end, there's a way, there's like kind of just the letting go and the surrendering into the process, the whole process. And so even in physical survival, there is that deeper thing that when you can drop out of the terror and into the grace, you've got that larger part of you that's always partnering with you. It's always there. It's carrying you. It's enveloping you. It's embracing you through every single moment. But a lot of our stuff that we get caught up in is emotional survival,
Hmm.
and it's trying to stay feeling okay and feeling emotionally safe in a moment. And that is completely at odds with this being present with awareness, because when you're with awareness, you can be in a really deep state of not okayness in the emotional sphere, and in that deeper sense knowing that everything is fine and you're carried through, so that you can really have the experience of the moment without trying to shrink from it or change it or adapt it or make it something else, because you have this deeper part of you that is shepherding you through the process and through the moment.
Yeah. Stay in a moment.
So I have this really interesting experience, and it kind of speaks to this. And what it was is, I was noticing that there was this movement between me being in what I call my local now. So me being in my body, present, but not present with the whole, like the larger experience of me, but being in the moment and noticing time is right this very moment. And this moment moves on to the next, moves on to the next, moves on to the next, and there was a lot of anxiety in that. And so I was working with the idea of the larger self and the inner self and the whole self and all of these things in time and the now, and it all came together in this one particular experience, where all of a sudden in my heart center, where I was in that place of awareness, the now, the experience of the now, it, like, just, I won't want to say exploded, because it was very gentle, but it expanded out, so that it wasn't just the now of right this immediate moment. It was the now of the whole experience of me, and the whole experience of me being me and life being life and reality being reality. And it was it was kind of like this large pool. It went from being a very small dot to this very large pool out in all directions, in which the now is all happening at once, but it was all kind of uniform or in harmony with what my state of the moment was. So if I was in a state of equanimity and peace, like the whole now, everything coming to me, everything from the past, everything out to the side, everything above me, everything down below me, was all streaming out from this place of equanimity. It was like the now was in the center, radiating outward. And that particular center of me in the moment was really, the whole now was radiating from where I happened to be in that moment, in a state of frequency and vibration, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I love that image, or I have an image in my head of
Okay,
that
good.
being being like a point
Yeah.
in this very large in a universe, or a universe that's your unity, right? Of your awareness, your
Mm-hmm.
consciousness. And it reminds me of a conversation we had several months ago, where I was talking about having memories come to me, and rather than being in the moment experiencing the memory,
Mm-hmm.
it brought like all these different layers that I was experiencing simultaneously with the memory. And it's similar in that it was going out in all directions, and
Yeah.
there wasn't like a separate me in this moment calling up this separate memory or experience.
Yeah. It
It,
was all happening at one time.
yeah,
It was all in the now. It was all in the one.
right. And it wasn't
Um,
linear, because
no.
happening in all directions. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I noticed in working with that and working with this idea of what we're creating is that when I am in a place of allowing and being in the larger moment, not like the immediate moment, but the larger perspective of the moment, the larger now, that everything is taking care of itself. Like I don't have to make things happen. I simply need to set the vibration or the frequency or the desire, or for me it's less about desire, because desire is always this weird concept for me, but it's more about being in the frequency and the vibration of how I want life to be.
Yes.
And that life then it radiates backward in time in this way, but it also, everything is already completed even if I haven't done it yet. So, some of my ideas for books, my unfinished novels, right? My ideas for books on things, like they're all done. I just haven't completed the writing. Like I like there's
Mm-hmm.
the momentary now moving through or radiating in this larger time that still is, participating in things as is part of this flow, the flow of the moment. But the larger experience of the now and the larger experience of all that is part of this expanding now was taking care of itself. And I was just projecting from that now, that moment, how I want that to feel. And everything was just lining up based on how it was feeling. And it wasn't that things were different. So, like, for example, I've got a novel, God in Drag. Been out for a while. I put it out there. I said, have a good time. And I kind of ignored it then. And I started writing this companion book for it, and which kind of got the book sort of back into my present. And I was noticing that, like, in the larger now, both of those were done, and they were in the world doing what they were doing in the world, and I was moving into a place of non-interference with that, because I was in interference with that before, but in non-interference. So they were just doing their own thing. Like I didn't have to go out and do all this stuff to make them successful or whatever out in the world. Like I could just follow the flow of the moment, and that was already taking care of itself. And the same thing, like with the house and with life, that I didn't have to figure out, oh my gosh, how am I going to make a living in 6 months, because my larger me in the now has already got all that sorted out. Like I just need to let it happen. I don't
Mm-hmm.
need to make it happen. And if I can stay in that place of trust and of allowing and of letting life organize itself without interfering or limiting it by, placing certain conditions on it, then it is in this place of constant self creation and expansion, and working itself out and creating itself. from this larger experience that I don't, as my human experience, need to go out and figure out. Like letting go of that need to figure it out and trusting that that larger part of me has already got it. Everything's all organizing on that part and it'll come to me. It's like if you need a job and or you're looking for a job or you're thinking I'd like a change, and your larger self is out there pulling in these different kinds of opportunities for you to take advantage of. Or even here's a couple of better stories. It's my husband can be psychic when he feels like it. It's weird. Anyway, we were in Hawaii. We were trying to figure out, we were on vacation. We were going to move to Maui, and we were in Maui, and we were trying to figure out a place to live. And this is when, 2006, everything was very tight to try to get into. We were wanting a nice place and things, and we were driving around looking at want ads, couldn't find anything. And he sits up. We're laying in bed. He sits up and he's like, go get the paper, go get the paper. So I went and I got the paper, and in the paper was this ad, and it was a brand new ad, and it was this condo on the beach, and it was fully furnished and all this kind of stuff, and it was basically everything that we wanted. And we called them and they said, oh yeah, somebody's going to come here in a half an hour. And we said, can we be there in 15 minutes, because we were just down the street? And they're like, sure. So we showed up and wrote a check and got the place out from whoever was coming. But that wasn't going out and trying to make things happen necessarily. This was that we held the intention, we were doing some of the process, but we would not have, we didn't chase down that lead. That lead kind of appeared. It was organized for us to step into. And the same thing, we moved into another place, and we were like feeling dissatisfied with where we were because the owner was being funky. And so all of a sudden he's like, oh, we need the paper. So we got the paper, and there was this open house for this other place. And it was that day, and it was the only open house on that day. And we went and we ended up getting that place, and we moved up the street some more. So those things weren't things that we did from a personality level of trying to create our larger experience. That was something that we were moving with the current of life, and life was organizing it for us. And we just had to kind of put things together to make that happen. So it's a really, and I've got tons of those examples of being in the flow of allowing the larger part of you to organize on your behalf instead of trying to micromanage what that experience could be. And I think that's really a skill that we can cultivate right now in this time of uncertainty, in trying to create this new reality for ourselves and for the world, to be in that place of trusting that there's more forces out there for all of us that are creating for us personally, and then all of us collectively, and that our job is really to be focused on how we want our life to feel, and how we want it to feel, not just for us, but if you want more of love in the world, so that's available to everybody, and to offer up, I want to feel abundant, and I want abundance to be available for everybody. And to be gracious and expansive with what it is that we choose for us, and in allowing that to be the experience for everybody who chooses that as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. This image that, still with where you were saying about
the big now.
Big now. Yes. Thank you. And that every step or choice or movement forward in our lives that we make becomes the center of our big now. And it's like we're bringing this whole enormous, cloud of possibility and things already done, and the wheels moving, and all these things, like you're talking about. And each step that we take gives us a new center, which gives us access to some other combination or parts or whatever of the whole now. And that the energy that we're holding, the energy that we're looking for and tending to create in our lives, is what then calls forth in that moment.
Yes, absolutely. So what you are in the now, what you are doing in your little now, in the big now, is creating the next now, and moving onward. And I like for me, I know when I focus too much on desires as outcomes or goals or things or how I want something to look, and I get all caught up and messed up actually. Like I've got friends who love vision boards, and for them, that the vision board coalesces their vision into this single thing. And for me, a vision board like has all these different things. There's nothing in common, and except that if I focus on one, then it kind of limits possibility for me in other things. And so for me, if you're not a vision board person necessarily, like finding this unifying feeling of what you would like life to feel like. And it can just be contentment or happiness. It doesn't have to be this high level thing. It
Right.
can be just enjoying the moment and perpetuating that feeling throughout your day. And if you are enjoying your moment, like your larger self knows what you want. It's not like you have to remind it every day, you know, it's just doesn't, it knows you more than you know yourself. So you don't have to keep restating things 1,000 different ways, but coming into then that feeling of just allowing it to be and of enjoying how you would like life to feel, then those things begin to come to you in harmony with that feeling. And it's being consistent with the feelings that you would like rather than focusing on all the things that you think would give you that feeling. For me, that really helped me to hold some continuity in the center of the now.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, there's so many teachers, touch on this in how to manifest and law of attraction and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's Mike Dooley who talks about the cursed hows, that
Yeah,
you want something, right? You have this vision, and then we get caught up in, well, how is it going to happen, or it can't
yeah,
happen, or that's not possible, and we shut ourselves down. Whereas if, like you're saying, you're holding a vision or an energy or an aspiration, and you're open, then
mm-hmm.
those hows and whens and whys are going to be taken care of by
Yeah,
our higher
because it's
self.
not, because if you have to figure out the how, you get in the way. You limit the
Right.
possibility of how things come to you, and it's been a big struggle for me and for a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
to let go of what they tell us. Like we've always been taught that you're supposed to go, you have your goal, and then you have got your objectives of the how. Like, and
Right.
then you gotta prosecute that how.
Mm-hmm.
So that you took everything off of your list about how you're supposed to reach every single one of these milestones to get to this this final result. And sometimes that works, but oftentimes it doesn't because we get in the way and we don't allow things to unfold in these amazing and beautiful ways, because we can't see possibility if we're only looking for a particular path.
Yeah, right. I'm going back to the story you told about your husband sitting up in bed and being like, I get the paper.
Yeah,
He had could have rolled over and thought, yeah, probably be a good idea to look in the one ads today. And then just
yeah,
rolled
no,
over, and that was that. Right. So that's the other thing. We need to be open. We need to allow inspiration to come to us. And then there is a certain amount of action to take, but it's not like wrestling something to the ground. It's about the action to take is usually following the inspiration.
yeah. And usually that inspiration, well, not for him because he's like, when he gets an inspiration, like, he's like a freight train, you can't stop him. But for most people who are not like that, those inspirations move us into something that's uncomfortable. And and it's the being willing, and we've had this conversation, our last conversation, and with other people, that it's being willing to transit that discomfort because that's moving us into this greater sense of possibility. And there's one story a friend of mine tells, that we were both at the Maui Writers Conference, and I was there, and I was kind of a loner because that's kind of my nature. And she was there, and she was not really connecting with people so much. And she saw me, and she was like, okay, this is the person you need to sit down and you need to start a conversation. And so she sat down and we started a conversation, or she asked me a question. And then within me, there was part of me that could have been like, yeah, dismissive of the conversation. But there was that part of me that had a very conscious choice that this is somebody I should be talking to. And there's a purpose to this conversation. Or
Mhm.
I could have just had a surface level conversation and we'd both watch the speaker and left. But we've been great friends ever since. We're one of my best friends. And this has been gosh, 13 years or so. But it was her having that moment of, okay, this is what you need to do. You need to sit down and talk to this person. And me rising to that moment, saying, I need to receive this and be in this conversation because there's something significant here. Even though part of me was just like, I was tired. It was the end of the day. I was just like, can't I go home now? But we both met that moment and transcended the no of the moment to be in the yes of the moment. And it created this wonderful friendship that for both of us, because then I moved to Maui and we were in the same writers group and I wrote a novel and, all this kinds of stuff that flowed from that, that neither of us ever would have created from our personality or ego, but we were both in this state of desiring more and connection and to work, have people to connect with writers and things like that. And we both rose to this moment because that's what the moment was. But we weren't pursuing anything. We just simply responded to the pull of the moment in a way that brought us together.
That's great. I love that. And if you had gone to that writers workshop convention, if you had gone with the intention of connecting with somebody who was going to change your life, the person who was going to help you write your book,
and I was on the lookout for that person,
that you would have had a checklist, you would have had a limited inventory to choose from how that was going to happen, and you would likely have completely missed that opportunity. And it's not always comfortable or convenient, but if we listen to ourselves, if we stay open, we can feel that tug or that nudge. And if we're willing to follow it, then discover, new things. If we try, you have a pull like that, and then you feel like you have to explain it to yourself why you're going to follow it, you're going to blow it because it's beyond explanation. It doesn't make sense necessarily. Yeah. It's not logical. It's not, you couldn't possibly see who this woman was going to be to you in the years ahead. And
and I didn't create it, and she didn't. Like, from the personality and ego level, neither of us created that. It was our larger self that organized this on our behalf, and this is always happening. And it's this enormous grace and skill of being able to trust that larger part of us, that part of us that's our awareness, that we are loved, that we are part of this larger sphere, and that what is creating our life is not our conscious creation. What is creating our life, for the most part, we're interacting with it or responding to it consciously, but what's creating this larger container of our life is what actually created our life in the first place, which is this larger part of ourselves that knows us more than we know ourselves and is moving us through the world in this wonderful grace, if we allow it to be that way. Because in my view, everything that we ever wanted is inspired by this part of us. And if we relax into the flow of this larger part of ourselves, we'll probably won't have the life that we envisioned or that's on our vision board or that we intended, but we will have exactly the life that is most satisfying and exciting and interesting and meaningful for us, because we're actually being guided by that part of us that knows our deepest longing.
Right. Yeah. Years ago, I designed a pendant that was about based on like that struggle of the part of me that tries to grapple with things and make things happen and, force it into being. And the part of me, I would say, my heart of hearts, which is a larger self, right? It's another way to look at that or personify it or whatever. And so on the piece, it says, coming out of like that struggle, sort of an exhaustion, right? Then my heart said, trust me, I'm on your side.
Yes. Yes. And I think that's part of the challenge, is that we don't necessarily trust, one, that we have that larger part of us and that larger part of us is on our side, because we get so conditioned with how we need to measure up and prove ourselves to authority figures, to God, to the universe, to, life, to the angels, that somehow we are and this kind of goes back to our last conversation, we are inherently insufficient.
Mm-hmm.
And so we always need to prove ourselves, and we're always in a defensive posture to this part of ourselves instead of allowing ourselves to be loved and to accept and to receive that envelopment and receive that support. And maybe that is in this place where there's so much collapse of on the economic side, that we can begin to collectively open up to this other kind of support and let go of money being our only support, because that's kind of the paradigm that we're in. Is if you have money, you've got everything, you can access everything you need. But that's kind of a false value, because when you're in this deeper place, everything that you need can be provided for you. And it doesn't come down to the size of your bank account, because life happens in magical ways.
Right. Absolutely.
All right. Do you have any last little tidbits before we wrap up? And if not, you can tell us how people can reach you.
I will tell you both.
Okay.
That I have is to practice staying in wonder and curiosity.
Yeah.
Rather than being fearful or stressed about how is this going to XYZ, just shifting the sentence to I wonder what's going to happen with this, and allow the greater you and source, God, however you perceive that, to start bringing in the answers. Right? To stay, ask the question and stay out of trying to come up with the answer, because we don't have the answers to that. It's bigger than us.
Yes.
So to ask what else is possible, how is this going to, I wonder what this will look like.
My two big phrases with that, just to interject for a moment, are I wonder how this is going to work itself out.
Yes.
Because it takes it away from me trying to work it out. So that's a big deal. And then the other one is the recognition that things always do work themselves out. Like the things that I don't pay attention to work themselves out. It's the things I pay attention to that all get messed up.
Yeah.
And so it's that recognition, and just that thing, the knowing that when there's something, like when there's a disturbance in the force somewhere in my life, especially the places that I kind of let organize themselves, it's just like, that'll work itself out. I don't need to worry about that. I don't need to take an action step. I don't need to stress. That will work itself out, and to just kind of acknowledge that will work itself out if I give it the space to do so.
Yes, I like it. And so, if people want to hear more about tools and tips like the wondering instead of worry and all that, you can find me for the most part on Facebook. I have a page called Spoonbender's Cafe. I also have a group called Spoonbender's Cafe Group, and it's a place where we can have these discussions and ask questions and get some coaching and support. And also from the Spoonbender's Cafe page, you can pretty much find out whatever else I'm up to, and I'll always just contact me to have a discussion or ask questions and get some support.
Yes, or learn how to bend a spoon, which is a whole different experience. You can have a spoon and say, I wonder how this is going to bend today.
Right.
See what you can create there.
And that's all about letting go of thinking that you know what's going to happen next.
Yeah. And allowing yourself to be with the moment as it's unfolding, and the larger moment, not just like you and the spoon, because I always get scared when it's just me and the spoon. And then the larger part of me will kick in, and I'm cool. Okay, well, thank you for your conversation today. It's always fun talking with you, and please reach out to Michė if you want to find out more.
Yes, and thanks for having me. Take care.
You too. This is your host, Christine Madera. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation from the edge of consciousness. You can find all our conversations at conversationsfromtheedge.net. You'll also find links to schedule a private conversation with me or any of my friends, as well as tools to help you expand your own consciousness and explore what's possible for you outside the boundaries of your current perceptions. Feel free to use this podcast to start your own conversation by sharing it with friends, on social media, in your blog, or even in your own podcast. And as always, live the adventure of pushing your own edge. It's the most amazing adventure there is.